Hi, I'm Matthew.
And I'm Susan. Together we love to travel.
We have had some awesome adventures.
Whether it be national parks like Grand Canyon or Yellowstone,
In planes, trains, or ferries,
in places near or far,
beautiful or historic.
we can't wait to share our next adventure with you.
So let's get going.
I don't have that many hands.
Alrighty, folks. Welcome to the Wild Drive Tour. My name is Rachel. I am up here in this dark brown Prius at the front of our line today, and I will be your guide through our free roam area. Now we've got 7 different species of hoofstock out there, and they have over 435 acres to roam around.
Wow.
So we'll get to see whoever it is that we can see today. Now we should be getting going here in just a minute. We're still waiting on the okay from our tour station. Kind of like ground control here. But now is definitely the time to start getting these vehicles in drive, getting turned on. And I'd love to see some thumbs up out the windows if everybody can hear me. Just one last radio check before we get going. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Oh yeah, alrighty. So we've got the okay. We're gonna start putting our vehicles in drive and slowly rolling on out here. So again, welcome to the Wild Drive Tour. We are going to be heading into our free roam area today. Very exciting. Now before we get out there, we are going to have to go over a couple of rules of the road, get the boring stuff out of the way first.
Well, at least you admit it.
Now, first up, we are going to be keeping a very tight spacing between our vehicles today. We're only going to leave about half a car length to a compact car length between all of our vehicles. We'll only be going about 5 miles an hour in the free roam area, so I promise it won't feel claustrophobic. And we're just going to do this so no animals get in between our cars and cause a little bit of a traffic jam. Now the other thing that we can practice right now actually is we're not going to be stopping at any point while we're in the free roam area. We can practice that on this stop sign. We do have the right of way, so just feel free to roll right on through that stop sign. Now, all the animals that we have out there are going to be prey species. And they can get kind of nervous when we stop our big vehicles right next to them. And they might even jump away and run off. And we definitely don't want that. We want everyone to get the same chance to see all of our animals. I'm going to go really slowly as we go past them so that we can keep that tight formation and everyone will get a good chance to see him. So we'll slow down to probably about 2 miles an hour at that point. It is a beautiful day here at Northwest Trek. You guys really chose the right day to come on. And now would be actually a great time to roll down your windows. It will really give you a chance to see, hear, and even smell our animals. Now, while we will be engaging many of our senses today, the only senses we will not be engaging are our senses of touch and taste. We will not be touching our animals at any time. They are wild animals. Now, along with that, I will ask that we keep our arms, legs, heads, and children inside our vehicles at all times. That means inside our windows and inside our sun and moon roofs. And this is for your safety. We never know when we might have to stop unexpectedly.
They used to use these right here, these little bus things. They don't
now we understand that accidents can happen out there in the free roam area. We've got our windows down, we're having a good time. If you do happen to drop something, never fear. We have Blake at the back of our line today. He's in that Prius that's got all the zoo animals on the side of it. And he is going to kind of act like our lifeguard. Gotcha. He is authorized to step out of his vehicle and retrieve that item for you. And you can retrieve it back at the tour station where we just left from if you'd like to. But the rest of us are not authorized to leave our vehicles at all. We're going to be staying inside of our cars at all times. And that's again for our safety and also for the animals' comfort.
And the animals' comfort. Oh man, sorry.
Alrighty, so we're going to be making a right turn up here and heading down our maintenance road. This is going to get us our first behind the scenes look at Northwest Trek, which is kind of exciting. And it will also be a really good chance to practice our driving skills. This road is going to be narrow and windy, just like our roads in the free roam area. Drivers, I'm going to ask that you try and stay in the middle of the road as much as possible. Our shoulders of the road out there can also be soft or covered in vegetation, and there are many places where if you get your tires off the road, there is no guarantee we'll be able to get you back on. Now is also a good chance to hand over photography duties to one of your passengers.
Oh, we got that. Don't worry.
This will really give you the opportunity to enjoy and appreciate our wildlife while still multitasking and keeping your eyes on the road. Now, if you do happen to have any emergencies while we're out in the free roam area, please call the number at the bottom of your ticket confirmation and then dial 0 to reach an operator. They'll be able to get a hold of either myself or Blake there at the back and let us know what's going on. Otherwise, it can be a little bit hard to communicate with me up here in the front. Alrighty, so as we get to our maintenance area, we're going to be going through 2 gates. And as we head through this first gate, you can look to the left and see both our old trams and our brand new electric trams. So if you guys came and did this tour prior to 2020, you'll know that we used to do it a little bit differently. If you'd like to know when those trams will be up and running, you can check back on our website for more information. They should hopefully be up and going soon.
Yeah, those ones. That's what they used to do. That's what I remember.
Alrighty, so as we get to this second gate, you're going to hear over the radio, maybe feel under your tires, a little bit of a bump. Now, that's nothing to worry about, that's just our cattle guard. And it's just there to discourage our hoofed animals from paying our folks over here in the maintenance yard a visit. They love our critters just as much as we do, but a visit from a caribou can be a little bit much for a Monday afternoon. So here come those bumps. Alrighty, now as soon as you've crossed over that cattle guard, you are officially in the free roam area. Yay. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we are looking for 7 different species of hoofed animals, and they can be anywhere within this space. So, depending on what time of year, or even what day, or even what hour you come and visit with us, you might see something different.
That's true.
Now, some of the animals that we are looking for here today include our Woodland Caribou, our Roosevelt Elk, our Columbia black-tailed deer, our moose. We have one moose out here. Her name is Aspen. Our American bison. We could see some bighorn sheep, maybe even some mountain goats. We'll see whoever is roaming around. Now, I will allow you to make one exception to some of my rules. If you do see an animal, you're allowed to point with just your hand out the window at that animal, so the folks behind you have a chance to see it too.
So we're in charge of that.
Today we are going to be passing through 3 different types of habitat. We're going to be going through our woodland habitat, like the one we're in right now, our grassland habitat, and then passing by some of our wetland habitats. And along our way today, we're going to be passing a lot of this tall pink flower that we can see on our right and our left all through this first section. And it's that tall flower with lots of little flowers coming off of it, and that's going to be known as foxglove. It is a non-native species that we will talk about a little bit later. So I'm going to offer you all a hint about how to spot wildlife out here in the free roam area. So we have eyes on the front of our heads. Now this means that we have really good depth perception. We are really, really good at spotting movement. So if you're looking for wildlife out here, look for an ear flicking or a tail moving rather than the outline of an animal, especially in these forested areas. You're much more likely to be able to spot something. All of the species that we have out here are going to be prey species. So you might notice that they have eyes on the sides of their heads. And this allows them to look all the way around them, even when their heads are down and they're grazing. But, as we mentioned a minute ago, we have eyes on the front of our heads, which means that we are a predator species. right here on our right, we're getting our first glimpse of Horseshoe Lake, which is aptly named for its horseshoe shape. And it is our only continuous wetland that we have out here in the free roam area. That means that it will have water in it all year round. So it's a great spot to try and see some wildlife. I'm not seeing anyone out on the lake right now, but that doesn't mean there isn't a ton of life going on below the surface. This lake is home to all kinds of snakes and frogs and fish and lots of different types of amphibians that call this place home. Now, if you look back across the lake to our right, kind of almost behind us, you're going to see a fourth kind of habitat. And that is going to be a human habitat, yeah. So that cabin used to belong to Doc and Connie Helliard, who are our park benefactors. They moved to Tacoma in 1936 and very quickly began looking for a vacation home to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city. In 1937, they found Horseshoe Lake and bought their first 100 acres here for only $450, which even by the standards of the 1930s was ridiculously cheap. That's because this land looked a lot different back then. Back in the 1920s, it had been owned by a logging company who had logged it extensively. And then a little bit later, also in the 1920s, a huge fire had burned out of control from Ashford all the way through this area. So there were very few trees here at first. As we come to the top of this hill, we are seeing our first animals. This is going to be our bison herd off here to our left. We're going to get a much better view of them later in the tour, but we'll go slowly past now anyway. So this is going to be our herd of cow bison. I can tell that this is our cows because they're all grouped together. When it's not mating season, our males and our females will tend to separate. And this is just to reduce stress on everybody. This way the boys don't have to compete for the ladies' attention when it's not even breeding season. Bison are a little bit unique though. Instead of forming a bachelor herd, like say our Roosevelt Elk might do, our bull bison will go off by themselves. Those are going to be our cow bison. Now our cows are also going to be a little bit smaller than our bulls. Our bull bison can weigh anywhere between 2,000 and 3,000 pounds, which is mind-boggling. That's larger than the car I'm driving right now. Our cow bison aren't too shabby either. They only come in at about 800 to 1,200 pounds, which is still pretty incredible. Bison used to be found all across North America. They used to range all the way from the East Coast all the way into Washington. They were found east of the Cascades here, and then down even across the border with Mexico. It was estimated that at one point there were over 60 million in North America. And I've even heard it said that they used to measure the size of a herd by how many days or even weeks it would take the entire herd to go past town. Today, we have just about 500,000 bison left in the U.S., which is pretty sad because they are absolutely critical to the grassland habitats, like the one that we're passing through right now. They'll walk through these tall grasses and pick up seeds and bugs on their thick coats and spread them to new areas. And as they walk through these areas, they'll also till up the soil with those huge, massive hooves, kind of aerating it as they go along. Now, a lot of those seeds and bugs will make them really itchy. And so they'll do something that we call wallowing. They'll dig a spot using their horns and their hooves in the dirt, and they'll roll around in it. And in the process, they'll get off all of those seeds and plant them deep in the earth, while coating themselves in a layer of dirt and mud that kind of acts like an insect repellent. And also also helps to cool them off in the hot summer months. And then when it rains, that little hollow fills up with rainwater, and it waters the seeds and the grassland it regenerates. So the bison are kind of like gardeners in a lot of ways. They'll plant new seeds, they'll water them, and they'll till up and aerate the soil. And here on our left, we're passing one of those bison wallows right now. It just looks like a big patch of dirt, but it's actually kind of exciting. And it's another one of those signs that we can see of wildlife. Even when we can't necessarily see an animal in the moment, there are always signs that they've been here. So what happened to the bison? We used to have over 60 million, and today we have just about 500,000. What happened? Oh, I almost missed him. He's sitting out there on that hill. We have one of our bull bison out there. Now, as I mentioned a minute ago, our bull bison do tend to go off by themselves when it's not breeding season. And while you or I might be lonely, that bison isn't. This is pretty typical behavior for them. They grow to be pretty big, and they need a lot of grass to support all of that muscle mass. We're getting an especially good view of that classic hump between his shoulders that supports that massive head. I think we'll get an even better view of him from the other side. But from over here, we can a little bit see his horns. Now, the bull bison's horns will go straight out and straight up from his head in kind of an L shape. Whereas the cow bison, their horns are going to curve out from their head in more of a C shape. And I think of it as C for cow bison. Now, it's thought that the cow bison have these curved horns so that they don't accidentally hurt their baby bison when they're nudging them along with their heads. Whereas the bull bison, their horns are out and always ready to rumble. Another way I can tell that he's going to be one of our bulls is this thick cape of extra fur over his shoulders and part of his back. We won't see on our ladies. Hopefully we'll get a better view of them later and be able to really see that more clearly. Alrighty, so we're beginning to enter one of our forest habitats here. We're going to be passing through a lot of Douglas fir. We're going to be seeing some big leaf maple, some vine maple, and some western red cedar. Now our undergrowth is mostly going to be made up of stinging nettle and a variety of different kinds of ferns. Now that stinging nettle is that tall plant with the spade-shaped leaves, and it's another one of the reasons that I do ask everyone keep their arms and children inside their vehicles. Definitely don't want you guys getting stung. We're also seeing a little bit more of that foxglove as we come in and through here. Now, as I mentioned a little bit ago, that foxglove is a non-native species. That might not seem like such a big deal. It's really pretty plant, right? It's nice to look at. But it doesn't have a major role in this ecosystem like a plant like our stinging nettle that has evolved here for hundreds and hundreds of years. Now, as you might be able to tell from the name or personal experience, the stinging nettle has a very uncomfortable toxin in it that causes a rash if you do happen to touch it. And this is to deter a lot of predators from eating it. But there is one animal that has evolved for hundreds of years just to eat the stinging nettle, and that's the red admiral butterfly. They have that close, interconnected relationship that you'll find among native species in their native habitat. But plants like the foxglove, even though it's really pretty to look at, don't have that kind of a relationship. And many introduced plants can even cause a lot of problems. So up in the back of this grove, as we're coming around this corner, you're going to see something white up on the hill at the back of that grove. We're going to come by slowly so everyone can peek up and get a chance. And if you see that white fluffy body, that's going to be one of our mountain goats. Yeah. So you'll notice that area under those trees really doesn't have a lot of vegetation. That's because that is our cedar grove. Now our cedar trees has wide, spreading needles that kind of act like an umbrella, and they'll stop a lot of sunlight and rain from reaching the earth, which prevents vegetation pollution from growing there. But it also provides a great spot to see wildlife, like that mountain goat, who's going to be one of our billy goats, one of our male mountain goats. We have 2 billies and 4 nannies here in the park. As you might be able to tell from that bright white coat and their name, mountain goat, they are typically found in very alpine, very mountainous regions. They're well adapted for forest habitats such as this one, but they're definitely more common to places like the North Cascade Range, where they are native to.
Which is
Now, one place
close
that they
to where
are
we live.
not native to is actually the Olympic mountain range, but they were introduced there in the early 1900s. And their population absolutely took off. They loved it there. But there was one thing that the North Cascade Range had in abundance that the mountain goats couldn't find in the Olympic mountain range, and that was salt. Mountain goats need a lot of salt in their diets. So they turned to a rather unlikely source to get their salt needs met, and that was humans. They found salt in our salty sweat, in our salty urine, even in our salty snacks. As you can imagine, humans don't like to give up their salt all that easily, and this led to some conflicts between the humans and the mountain goats. As we were talking about with that foxglove, species that are not native to an area or introduced can cause all kinds of havoc. So back in 2018, they started a program of transplanting those mountain goats from the Olympic range to the Cascade Range. And they would actually airlift these goats, which I'm sure was quite a sight to see. Now, during this process, they did find some orphaned mountain goats, and we are seeing more mountain goats up the hill here on our right. Up. Yep, these are going to be our Nanny mountain goats. And I just had to double check myself for a minute because they were blending in so well with those patches of sunlight that I almost wasn't sure. I'm down here on the passenger side of this itty bitty car.
Yeah, they're way.
It's very hard for me to see up that hill, but those are going to be our Nanny goats. So during this transplantation, they did find some orphaned mountain goats who wouldn't have been able to survive in their new habitat of the North Cascades without a nanny goat to show them the way, teach them how to be a goat. So they were brought here to live out the rest of their life here at Northwest Trek,
There's no bison here.
where they've got free medical and dental. So it's a pretty good deal for them.
Probably get it better.
Now we do have 4 mountain goats. 4 nanny goats, and one of those is going to be a lot smaller than the others. I wasn't seeing her up on that hill, but if you do happen to see a goat that's a little smaller with some smaller horns, that's going to be baby Nettle. She is our youngest mountain goat. She's only a year old, and she was born here last May. And over on our left, we're getting another good view of that bull bison, just hanging out there in that field, having a good old time. Now, baby Nettle was born here a year ago. She was our first mountain goat born here in over 15 years, so we were pretty excited to have her here. Mountain goats are very, very good at what they do, which is climbing all over the rocks of their native regions. Their hooves are actually convex rather than concave, which just means that they poke out rather than rounding in on themselves. And they've got a sticky kind of pad on the bottom of their foot that acts a little bit like the rubber on a hiking boot. It gives them really good traction. They can also do something kind of cool while climbing around those rocks. They're actually capable of doing a pull-up. They can hook both of their front hooves over a rock that's taller than them and do a pull-up onto that rock, which I think is pretty wild.
That's cool.
That is pretty cool.
I know that I can't even do a pull-up. I would lose a pull-up contest with a mountain goat in a hot minute. On our left, we're passing some more of those bison wallows, those very exciting dirt patches. You might also notice as we come through the free roam area today, some bits of white fluff scattered different places. I'm passing one on my right now. And those are just going to be from our mountain goats shedding out their winter coats. And that fluff won't be be there for very long. Our birds will make very good use of that to line their nest boxes. Really give them a pretty cushy new home. Alrighty, so as we enter this forest habitat, we are actually going to be approaching one of our seasonal wetlands. Now, this means that this wetland will look different at different times of year. And I have a request for you all. This isn't just a sit back and relax tour. I want you all to point out the window for me the first time that you see water. Now that spot is going to be very different. Say if you were to come back in August or September, it would probably be just a muddy patch and you'd see water somewhere else. That's because our wetlands act like a giant sponge during the rainy season. They'll soak up a ton of water and then release it slowly over the course of the year. And this helps prevent flooding. This is actually really, really crucial. In places where humans have replaced wetlands with human habitats, you'll see a lot more flooding, which can get pretty dangerous. And straight ahead of us on this hill, as we come down and go to the right, we're going to be passing by 3 different black-tailed deer. Those are going to be our does. Now, in our deer family, the females are not going to have antlers and the boys will. The only exception to that is going to be our caribou. Now, if anyone did start pointing, the first place where we can see water is right back there, right now. And here are our black-tailed deer over on our left. And it looks like we have one yearling buck. He'll be the one standing right there on that hill. He's got 2 tiny baby antlers that he's growing. Hi, buddy. We'll go slowly past them so we don't startle them away. As we come back past those deer, we're going to be really careful not to stop near them. We definitely don't want to startle them away. And I just love to remind everyone to keep those gaps between our vehicles nice and small. I am on a very shortwave broadcast, and if you get too far behind us, you might lose me. And I would hate that. I'm not sure if you're sick of the sound of my voice yet. But it's definitely really important for me to be able to communicate with you guys. So let's just keep those gaps small and definitely not stop. So I don't know how many of you folks have seen an American bison in your backyard ever, but I'm sure many of you have seen some of our Columbia black-tailed deer. Or if you're visiting east of the Cascades, you might be more familiar with our white-tailed deer. They're in the same family, but 2 distinct groups on either side of that mountain range. We have black-tailed deer all the time wandering through Eatonville. In fact, we have so many that some people even consider them a bit of a nuisance. I myself am a gardener, and I definitely don't appreciate it when the deer come through and nibble on my plants. But I've got a very simple solution for that. I'll just mix up a solution of lemon juice and cayenne pepper, and I'll spray it on my plants. That won't hurt the plants, and it won't hurt the deer, and it's just a gentle deterrent. It's just one of the ways that I live more peacefully with my native neighbors, native flora and fauna around here. Now, who wants to wander out into that wetland right now and take a big drink of water?
No.
Let's take a big gulp of water out there.
No, I don't think so.
Well, I hope none of you do, because that water is a little bit gross. I saw our Roosevelt Elk wading through it the other day. There's a bunch of dead plants in there. I've even seen animals go to the bathroom nearby. But there is a very good chance that the water from that wetland is going to end up in my water bottle one day.
Thanks for
And that's because our wetlands are absolutely crucial in replenishing our very limited supply of clean drinking water. We're going to have another black-tailed deer here on our right, just in this stand of Foxglove. Hello, my friend. Yeah.
What are you doing?
Now, I did mention that I am a gardener. And one thing that I'll always try and do is find a native alternative to plants like our foxglove and plant those instead. And that just provides more food for our native wildlife habitat, and it's also a lot easier on me. They're in their native habitat, which means that they don't need any more water or nutrients or sunlight because they live here already. So just another little thing that I try and do to support our wildlife. But we were talking about wetlands, about how they are so crucial for restoring our supply of fresh water, our very limited supply.
Look at all that racket.
You might be saying to yourself, Rachel, I know that over 70% of our planet is covered in water. What do you mean it's a limited resource? Well, you would be right, but most of our planet is actually covered in salt water that's in the oceans. Only about 3% of our planet actually has fresh water on it. And I'm just going to ask again, guys, that we keep those gaps between our vehicles small at all times. Now, of that 3% of the planet that has fresh water, only about 1% of that is actually accessible to us. And on our right, we're going to be having what looks like our cow herd of Roosevelt elk. You can see them bedded down on the trees to our right. They are all spread out through there.
I see one.
Ooh, we're gonna get a good view of them for a while. Hello, lady. Now, as I mentioned a minute ago,
Right there, dude. Yeah, got it.
in our deer family, all of the males are going to have antlers. The females will not. The only exception to that will be our caribou. So I can tell that this is our cow herd because most of the elk out there do not have antlers. Now I said most because a couple of you might spot that a couple of them have little baby antlers on their heads. And those are going to be our spike bulls. Until they're about 3 years old, our bulls are going to stay with their mom and their aunts, live with the female herd until they get kicked out when they reach maturity and go and join the bachelor herd. Now, our Roosevelt elk are going to be our largest species of elk in North America and our second largest species of the deer family. The only larger is going to be the moose. Now you might also notice that while they're all bedded down there in the trees, they're all facing in different directions. And this is pretty normal for them. When they bed down, they'll naturally all face a different direction, so they can all be on the lookout for predators at all times.
Makes sense.
So that's the guys.
Our Roosevelt elk used to be known by a bit of a different name. They used to actually be called Olympic elk, because they were found primarily on the Olympic Peninsula, and they were hunted extensively there. In fact, they were hunted so much that their numbers began to drop precipitously. Now, there was one hunter in particular that noticed that year after year, as he kept returning, there were fewer and fewer of these elk. And that hunter was President Teddy Roosevelt. And he decided to do something to save this species. He made hunting elk illegal and established Mount Olympus National Monument, where the elk could live unmolested. Now, this really helped them out. Their numbers rebounded until hunting was reopened back in the 1930s. But it was reopened with some changes. Now you did need a permit to hunt the elk, and there were only a limited number that were allowed to be taken every year. And just like today, the proceeds from those hunting permits go to support conservation agencies that manage those game populations and make sure that they're healthy for generations. Alrighty, we're coming up on our herd of cow bison again on our left. Yeah, we're gonna get a much better view of them this time. Try and see if you can spot those C-shaped horns. Now, out there with the females, there should be one much larger bison, and it's going to be one of our bull bison. One of the bulls will stick with the female herd throughout the year. Wow. And he's typically the one that did the best during the last breeding season. Yep, and it looks like he's going to be towards the right side of this group, a little bit further in the back. He's got a smaller female standing right up close to him, and he's got that big that large cape across his shoulders and back. We don't really see as clearly on our females. So, I don't think we've talked yet about what happened to those bison. We've been talking about how there used to be over 60 million, and today there are just about 500,000. Back in the late 1800s, just after the Civil War, there was a great push for westward expansionism. Everyone wanted to go and settle the uninhabited West. But there was only one problem with this vision. The West actually was already inhabited by the native people that lived there. And they relied on the bison as both a source of food and a cultural resource. So in order to force the Plains Native Americans onto reservations, there was the sanctioned near extermination of the bison. I'm going to pause that because just off to our right we are seeing our bull herd of Roosevelt elk. They are in the trees across this little pond. We can just see their antlers sticking up through those trees, which is always really impressive to me to see. It just kind of looks like a forest of their own. Almost like branches. See maybe if you can spot one moving their heads, but they're just off to the trees on our right across that pool. We should be able to get a good view of them as we come all the way around this corner. Now, we were talking a little bit earlier about our bison and how they have horns, and their horns are shaped differently. And you might notice that these elk have something very different on their heads. They have antlers. So those bison are going to keep their horns throughout their entire lives, and you're going to see the horns on both the males and the females. And that horn is just a little bit of bone that's covered in a substance called keratin, which is the same material you find in our fingernails. Now, those elk are going to have antlers on their heads, and they're going to grow those and drop them every year, which is pretty impressive, especially given the size of those antlers. Now, you might have also noticed as we went past that those antlers were kind of brown and a little bit fuzzy right now. Very different than the typical white bone that we think of when we think of antlers. That's because they're still in the process of growing those. That brown fuzzy substance is known as velvet, and it's one of the fastest growing tissues known to scientists. The only others being embryonic and cancerous tissue. That velvet can grow those antlers at a pace of up to an inch a day, which is pretty nuts. Imagine if your hair grew an inch a day for the rest of the summer. You'd have to cut it pretty freaky.
Very nice for me.
Now, a little bit later in our summer, that velvet is going to dry up and it'll feel like a dry, itchy scab to them. And they're going to rub it off on the trees and polish up those antlers and get them nice and sharp for the breeding season, where they're going to show off for the ladies and try and win a mate. Now, typically, the male with the largest antlers is going to be the most likely to find a mate. And he's going to be the oldest, but also the healthiest of our bulls. Now, if a bull has an injury or an illness during the year, he's going to devote a lot of energy to healing that injury or illness and won't have as much energy left over for growing his antlers. And they might be a little bit smaller that year. Or a elk might break part of an antler during their displays for the ladies during the breeding season. But that's okay. They'll drop those antlers a little bit later in the fall towards winter, and then they'll start growing them again in February. And they'll have a fresh chance to grow a beautiful large set of antlers and win their chance to find a mate. We're going to speed up a little bit through this field. I'm not seeing anyone right now through here. Hopefully we'll have some more time to spend with some of our animals a little bit later. So we were talking about our bison. I keep seeing something new and exciting and interrupting that story a little bit, but I promise you will get to hear the end of it. So our bison, they were nearly exterminated in the late 1800s. But thanks to the creation of places like Yellowstone National Park and the efforts of people like Buffalo Bill Cody, we were left with a few remnant herds of only a couple hundred, but we were left with something. Yellowstone National Park was created in the late 1800s, and hunting a bison was not allowed there. Today, we have about 500,000, but only about 5,000 of those are truly free roaming. The rest are mixed with cattle or have been domesticated. But if it weren't for people like Buffalo Bill Cody, we still wouldn't have them today. So even though sometimes us humans make mistakes, we overhunt the elk, or we purposefully try to exterminate the bison, we can still recover from those mistakes through careful conservation and a couple of people speaking up. Now you might notice as we come through this field a lot of large stumps through here. And that's all from that that logging company that was here back in the 1920s. But this field actually might have been cleared a little bit later, in the 1950s. And over on our left and our right, we're about to be passing some elk antlers that were shed last year, so you can get a little bit of a closer look at that. So Doc and Connie Hellyer, they bought this land back in the 1930s. They raised their 3 daughters here, and they even had a cattle farming operation in the 1950s. During that time, they cleared some land for those cattle. And that's probably what we're seeing through this field right here. Now, as their daughters grew up and Doc and Connie got a little bit older, they started to think about what they wanted this land to become next. Their daughters didn't want all of the time and responsibility that came with running a 500-acre cattle operation. In the early 1970s, they were approached by a land developer that wanted to turn all of this into a housing development. I'm sure it would look quite charming, covered in condos, but that wasn't really what they wanted for the land. It kind of pushed them into realizing that they wanted something different. Doc himself was an amateur naturalist. By profession, he was a pediatrician in Tacoma, but he had a great passion for Pacific Northwest plants and animals. And he wanted to create a place where other young naturalists could come and learn about native Pacific Northwest flora and fauna, and really connect with this kind of land. So they started looking for someone to donate the land to. And in 1971, Metro Parks Tacoma accepted the donation. In 1975, Northwest Trek opened their doors, and we're here today, hopefully carrying on Doc and Connie's dream.
In 3 more years, he'll be 50 years old.
Our wetlands do to support us. They act like a giant sponge to stop us from having so much flooding, and they act like a giant filter to filter out our clean water for us that we have such a limited supply of. And there's a lot that we can do to actually help out our wetlands. First and foremost, we can just use less water. The average American uses almost 100 gallons of water a day. which is pretty crazy when you think about the fact that we drink only a little bit less than a gallon a day. That's a lot of water, and we use it for all kinds of things. But there are definitely many areas where we can cut back, even say tonight. Just by taking a little bit of a shorter shower, shaving 5 minutes off, we can save a lot of water. Or we can try and wait to run our dishwasher until we have a really full load of dishes. That can also save us a ton of water and really support these wetland areas. So, just simple things that we can do. As we come, hello, my friend. Over here on the left, we have one of our billy mountain goats, our male mountain goats. And I believe that this is going to be Elwag. He's one of our 2 billy goats. He's just having a nice relaxing time in this shade here. This section of the forest is definitely very shady. You might actually notice that we went from a very bright area, and now under these trees it's quite dark. And a lot of the undergrowth here is ferns, which is a shade-loving plant. And then straight ahead of us, as we come around this hairpin turn, you can see a large bull bison grazing straight ahead towards the back of that fence. Another one of our large bulls. We don't see them out in this forest too often, but he's probably just trying to beat the heat of the sun right now.
Yeah.
He's got those very thick coats for sure. Now, you might also notice that a lot of these trees are about the same size, and they're pretty close together. This is a very young forest that doesn't allow a lot of sunlight to reach the ground. We know that it's actually only about 80 years old, which might seem pretty old to a lot of us, but on the time scale of a forest, that's very young. An old growth forest would look pretty different. It would have trees of all different sizes. And it would even have large areas where older trees had fallen and a lot of sunlight could reach the forest floor. And as a result, it would have very different plants and lichens and mosses growing here. And we can see that bison up again on our right now. Again, just towards the back of that fence. He's just munching away.
We just came around to the other side of it.
Yeah, it does.
Now, there are certain animals that rely on those old growth forests for their habitat. There are certain types of plants and mosses that will only grow in an old growth forest. And species like our woodland caribou, they are completely dependent on old growth forests for a certain type of lichen that grows there. We do have some woodland caribou here in the park. If we're lucky, we'll get to see one today. They are our most endangered species that we have here. They are actually locally extinct in Washington. They used to be found in the Selkirk mountain range in eastern Washington, but after numerous attempts to supplement that population, there were still only 3 females left by the end of 2018. 3 females alone cannot save a herd. They were sent north to join a larger herd and live out the rest of their days. You can now only find them across Alaska and Canada. Now you might have also noticed as we came through the free roam area today, some man-made structures on some of the trees, like one that I'm passing on my right now, and another couple that we can see clearly on that standing dead tree across this body of water. You can see 3 of them. Those are going to be some nest boxes. And we've set those up here so that our birds have a place to live as well. We here at Northwest Trek believe that everyone can make a difference and that everyone deserves a home, even our visiting birds. This is also another thing that you are not really going to find in a young forest like this one, but you'll see all over the place in an old growth forest, and that's going to be standing dead trees known as snags, like that one across the lake. Now those are major habitat for birds. Might just seem like a dead, useless tree to us, but that is prime habitat for birds of prey to perch and look out over the water, try and see if there's anything that they can catch in the water there, or for other types of birds to make their homes in those hollows. So another thing that we can do to support our native Northwest animals is to build bird boxes in our backyards. Most of Washington was logged extensively in the last century, and so a lot of our forests are very young. We have very few old growth forests left. Now, while not all of us might have 500 acres to donate like Doc and Connie, or the power of a US president like Teddy Roosevelt to create a preserve to protect our favorite animals, there's still a lot that we can do to help out our native flora and fauna, and we've talked about some of those ways today. We can use less water to support our wetland habitats. We can build bird boxes. But more than anything, we can come and we can learn about these native plants and animals. I always say that the first step towards conservation is caring, and just by coming here today, you guys have taken that step, so I really do applaud you. Maybe later today you're gonna go home and tell someone about the American bison and how cool they were, or about our old growth forests and how we need so badly to protect them, to protect all of the animals that live there too, like our woodland caribou. Or maybe you're a gardener like me and you're gonna go home and plant some native plants that we talked about. Whatever it is, you can take a small step or a large step, but any little thing can help out our animals a lot. Now, unfortunately, we have reached my least favorite part of our tour. This is the end of our time here in the free roam today. We are going to be making a right turn right now off onto this little gravel road. Now, just because our time in the free roam area is coming to an end doesn't mean our time at Northwest Track has to be over. Your ticket into the free roam area does get you into the rest of the park today, where you can see a whole bunch of other really cool stuff.